Hello everyone, welcome to Get Snoozy, where you relax, you listen, you sleep. Today, we bring you a collection of stories that will tear open the wounds stitched beneath our smiles. Downtown Los Angeles, 1:42 a.m. The neon sign outside the diner flickered like it was too tired to keep glowing. Inside, the place smelled like old grease, burnt toast, and a little bit of lost time. Miles sat in a corner booth, fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. He wasn't really hungry. He wasn't even tired. He was just drifting, the kind of restless that doesn't sleep. That's when he saw her. She walked in like she didn't care if the world ended. Messy hair, black boots worn thin, leather jacket half zipped like she'd just walked away from something on fire. She slid onto a red vinyl stool at the bar like she'd done it 100 times before. The waitress knew better than to ask questions, just poured her a cup of coffee and kept moving. Miles couldn't stop looking, not in a creepy way, more like when your favorite song comes on and you forget how much it used to mean to you. She caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. You always this obvious? He smiled, caught. Only when I see someone who looks like a paperback novel. She snorted. That's supposed to be a line? I guess it is now. She turned slightly on her stool. I just got dumped like 37 minutes ago. Miles blinked. Brutal. Yeah, he said I'm too much. She took a long sip of her coffee. He wasn't wrong. Well, I just got tired of eating alone. So here we are. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. I'm Harper. Miles. They spent the next hour swapping stories that were half lies and whole truths. By 3 a.m., they were walking the city, barefoot, shoes in hand. They named the pigeons, made up backstories for strangers in passing taxis, and argued over whether love was real or just chemicals and loneliness dressed up in poetry. By 5 a.m., they were on the roof of an abandoned building, watching the sky turn pink behind downtown's silhouette. And when he turned to look at her, she was gone. No goodbye, no phone number, no last look. Just the lingering warmth on the ledge where she'd been sitting, and the sunrise she hadn't stayed to see. Miles wasn't sure if she was real. For the first 3 days after that night, he kept expecting it to feel like a dream he'd made up. A strange but beautiful hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But then, 4 nights later, she walked into the diner again. Same jacket, same messy hair, but a different kind of quiet behind her eyes. You always sit in the same booth? She asked, sliding into the seat across from him before he could even answer. He nodded. You always vanish before sunrise. She smirked. It's kind of my thing. From that night on, she came and went like a tide, never predictable, always temporary. Some nights she stayed for hours, lying next to him on his rooftop, tracing shapes into the sky with her fingers. Other times, she barely made it through a slice of pie before excusing herself with no explanation. Harper didn't offer details. Miles didn't push. But he noticed things, the bruises on her wrists. She didn't explain the way she flinched when a motorcycle backfired down the street, the unopened texts she ignored, the way she looked at the sunrise like it was a ghost she couldn't bear to face. You don't have to wait for me, you know, she said one night, curled up beside him under a blanket on his rooftop. Her voice was barely a whisper, just above the hum of the city. I'm not waiting, he lied gently. I'm just here. She tilted her head, watching him like she didn't understand how someone could choose to stay. You're sweet, she said. That's dangerous. He laughed softly. So I've been told. She kissed him for the first time that night. It was sudden, soft, but left something inside him wrecked in the most beautiful way. And like always, before the sky turned gold, she was gone. She was a firecracker in the dark, bright, loud, and gone too soon. But Miles had already made up his mind. He'd wait for her, even if it meant chasing sunrises alone. It had been 5 days. Harper had never gone that long without coming back. Miles stared at his phone like it owed him answers. No messages, no missed calls. Just a blank screen that felt heavier with every passing hour. She didn't promise anything. She never did. But she always came back. Always. On the 6th day, he walked to her apartment. He'd never been inside. He didn't even know her unit number. Just the floor and the window that flickered with old string lights when she was home. But that night, when he buzzed the door, no one answered. The lights were off. The hallway smelled like dust and someone's leftover takeout. He stood outside her door, heart thudding too loud in his chest. There was a piece of paper taped to it. One fold, torn edges, blue ink, written like she was shaking. Miles unfolded it with trembling hands. You loved me like a beginning. I was always your ending. That was it. No name, no goodbye, no reason. He read it again and again, as if more meaning would bleed from the spaces between the words. His knees buckled, and he sat down right there in the hallway, leaning against her door like maybe she'd open it anyway. Like maybe she was still inside, waiting for him to knock louder. But there was nothing, just the note and the echo of her laughter he could still hear in his head. The sunrise that morning felt cruel. He stood on his rooftop, alone, watching the sky turn to gold and pink, and it felt like a mockery. She'd warned him. She told him she wasn't ready. He believed love could fix that. He believed he could wait her into healing, but Harper was never staying. She was always running, and this time she hadn't looked back. 2 years. That's how long it had been since Miles last saw her. He moved on the surface. New job, new apartment, friends who asked less and distracted more. But under it all, the quiet ache never really left. Every morning still felt a little incomplete. Every sunrise still reminded him of her absence. He stopped checking the diner after a while, stopped looking for her in strangers on the sidewalk. But there were nights he'd catch the scent of cinnamon and cheap coffee, and for a second, his heart would forget she was gone. Then, on a Wednesday, he saw her downtown, behind a liquor store, curled near a dumpster, blanket wrapped tight, hair tangled, face turned toward the wall like she didn't want to be seen. At first, he didn't believe it. It couldn't be her. But then she moved, brushing the hair from her eyes, and he saw her face, hollowed out, but still beautiful, still Harper. She looked like the ruins of someone who once lit up entire rooftops with a smile. He knelt beside her, heart in his throat. Harper. She blinked slowly, disoriented, her voice cracked. Miles. And then, like no time had passed, she burst into tears, real, shaking sobs that made her whole body tremble. He wrapped his arms around her, no questions, no judgment, just warmth, just safety. She fell asleep in his car that night, head against the window, blanket still tight around her shoulders. He watched her like he was afraid she'd disappear again. But this time, he wouldn't let her, not without a fight. Harper slept for almost 14 hours. Miles let her. He sat in the living room with the lights dimmed low, listening to the city through the window. Every now and then, he'd peek through the cracked bedroom door just to make sure she was still breathing. She looked small, smaller than he remembered. The girl who once climbed fire escapes barefoot and danced in diners at 2 a.m., now curled up under a borrowed quilt like she was trying to disappear into it. When she finally woke, the sun was slipping below the horizon. Where? Her voice rasped. dry from sleep and silence. "You're safe," Miles said gently from the doorway. "My place. Just rest." She blinked at him for a long time. "Why?" He sat down on the edge of the bed, but not too close. "Because I couldn't leave you there. Because you mattered. You still do." Harper turned her face away, eyes glistening. "I didn't want you to see me like that." "You think I haven't already seen you in every way?" he whispered. Her lip quivered. "You shouldn't still care. Maybe, but I do." She stayed. The first few days were quiet. She barely spoke. He didn't push. He left fresh towels, cooked simple meals, gave her space. Healing, he knew, didn't come in dramatic moments. It came in whispers, in letting someone sit in their silence until they were ready to speak. One night, over microwaved mac and cheese, she said softly, "I used to imagine you hated me." Miles looked up, startled. "But you didn't," she continued. "You just kept loving me, quietly, like I didn't ruin you." He reached across the table and gently took her hand. "You didn't ruin me," he said. "You just never knew how to stay." She squeezed his fingers, tears slipping down her cheeks. Maybe she still didn't know how, but for the first time in years, she wanted to try. It started small. Harper stopped flinching when Miles turned on the kitchen lights in the morning. She started leaving her shoes by the door instead of clutching them like she might run again. She still didn't sleep well, waking at odd hours, walking the apartment barefoot like a ghost. But when he found her in the living room at 4 a.m., she didn't hide anymore. She just looked up and whispered, "Couldn't sleep," and he'd sit beside her in silence. They didn't talk much about the in-between, the missing years, the choices that broke them. Some wounds weren't ready for names yet, but one morning, Miles made eggs, and Harper didn't leave before the sky turned pink. He noticed it first through the window, how the light crept across the floor, how it caught in her hair like it used to when she danced in it. She looked up from her coffee, noticed him staring. "What?" she asked, a small smile threatening the corner of her mouth. "You're still here," he said quietly. Harper blinked, then followed his gaze toward the sun peeking over downtown Los Angeles. It washed the rooftops gold. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she whispered, "I didn't want to run this time." The words were so soft, so unsure, like they might shatter if spoken too loudly. Miles didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just reached for her hand. She laced her fingers through his and held on. And they sat there, letting the sunrise fall over them, not as a goodbye like it used to be, but something new, a beginning, maybe even a promise. Harper started therapy 3 weeks after the sunrise. She found a clinic not far from the apartment, one that let her pay what she could afford, which wasn't much. But it didn't matter. Miles said, "Whatever you need," and meant it. He never asked her to explain, not about the nights she vanished, or the people she'd trusted who let her down, not about the addictions she didn't name, or the nights she cried alone behind dumpsters in the rain. But if she ever wanted to talk, he was always listening. Healing didn't look pretty. Some days, Harper didn't leave the bed. Some days, she laughed so freely that it made Miles stop whatever he was doing just to watch her. And some nights, she broke down in his arms, whispering, "I don't deserve this." He always held her tighter when she said that. "You do," he'd whisper back. "You always did." Little by little, her color returned. Her eyes, once dim and far away, began to stay present when she looked at him. She painted again, tiny sketches at first, sunrises, fire escapes, diners they never went back to, but still remembered. Miles framed the first one she finished, hung it in the kitchen without asking. Harper laughed when she saw it. "That bad, huh?" "It's perfect," he said. They still moved slow. She wasn't ready for labels, for promises, but she started saying "we" more often. She started making plans, not for tomorrow, but for next week. That was enough. One night, as they lay on the couch, with the record spinning and city lights pouring in, Harper whispered, "You loved me when I was a mess." Miles kissed her forehead. "I still do." It was just before sunrise, her favorite time. Harper sat curled on the fire escape outside Miles' apartment, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a chipped mug of coffee warming her hands. She stared out over the waking city, the soft hum of traffic below, the scattered twinkle of rooftop lights, the pink beginning to kiss the skyline. Behind her, she heard the window slide open. Miles stepped out barefoot, hair messy, hoodie too big. He smiled at her like he always did, like she was a miracle he'd never stop believing in. "I thought you'd already left," he teased gently, settling beside her. "I don't leave anymore," she whispered. They sat there for a while, not speaking. Words weren't always needed between them anymore. Some silences meant comfort, some meant love. This one meant everything. She turned to look at him, her eyes still sleepy, but clear. "Do you ever think about the day we met?" she asked. "All the time," Miles said. You should have run. I was already falling. She laughed softly, tucking her head against his shoulder. I think I'm ready. For what? For forever. He looked down at her, messy-haired, sleepy-eyed, beautiful, and pulled something small from his hoodie pocket. A ring, simple, quiet, just like them. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't rehearse a speech. He just held it out to her and said, "Then marry me in the morning with the sunrise." Harper stared at it, then up at him, tears rising, smile trembling. "Yes," she breathed. "God, yes." And for the first time since the day she disappeared, she didn't leave when the sun came up. She stayed. Before moving to the next story, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and share your experience with us. Ellie gripped the steering wheel of her big rig as she drove through the endless Arizona desert. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. The highway stretched ahead, empty and quiet, except for the soft hum of the engine and the crackling of the CB radio on the dashboard. Every night, Ellie looked forward to this moment, tuning in to the familiar channel where voices bounced through the airwaves like old friends stopping by for a chat. And there was one voice she never missed. "Breaker, breaker, this is Roadrunner Ellie. Anyone out there?" A brief pause, then a voice she had come to know, like the back of her hand, answered. "Big Bear Mark here. Copy that, Roadrunner Ellie. How's the desert treating you tonight?" Ellie smiled, her heart lightening. "Clear skies and good miles, Bear. What about you?" Their nightly ritual was simple but precious. Stories, jokes, little secrets shared over static and distance. Years of late nights, always listening, always waiting for Mark's voice. But tonight was different. After her call, silence. Ellie's fingers tightened on the mic. "Mark, come in, Bear. You there?" Static. Her heart skipped. She tried again. "Mark, you copy. Please say something." Still nothing but crackling white noise. The radio buzzed with other voices, but none were Mark's. Ellie's eyes blurred as a cold ache settled in her chest. Something was wrong. She kept calling, hour after hour, her voice growing hoarse, but the line stayed dead. The desert around her felt vast and empty, as if the world had swallowed Mark's voice whole. That night, Ellie drove slower, clutching the wheel, wishing she could reach through the radio waves and bring him back. She whispered into the silence, "Please come back, Bear. Don't leave me alone out here." But all she heard was static. Ellie's rig rolled slowly along the empty highway, headlights cutting through the dark like lonely beacons. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, the stars cold and distant above her. But inside the cab, a storm was raging. Her hands trembled on the wheel as she thought about Mark, his voice, his laughter, the way he made her feel like she wasn't alone on those long, lonely nights. She remembered the stories he told about his daughter, his dreams of buying a small farm someday, and how he loved the old country songs that played on the radio. All those memories felt like they were slipping through her fingers like sand. Ellie tried to focus on the road, but her mind kept wandering back to the silence. Why wasn't he answering? Was he hurt? Did something terrible happen? Her chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. She reached for the CB radio again. "Mark, it's me. Please say something," she whispered, hoping her voice would somehow reach him, even in the quiet desert night. Minutes passed like hours. No answer. Ellie's eyes filled with tears, blurring the road ahead. She wiped them away, but more came. She wanted to scream, to cry out all the fear and loneliness that built up inside her. Instead, she sat in the dark, holding the radio close like it was a lifeline. The truck's engine hummed softly, but it wasn't enough to fill the emptiness she felt. She realized then how much Mark's voice had become her anchor, something steady and real in a life spent chasing miles and sunsets. Now, without him, everything felt fragile and uncertain. She promised herself she wouldn't give up. No matter how long it took, she would find him. Because some bonds, even made of static and distance, could never be broken. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a soft orange glow on Ellie's tired face. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the silence where Mark's voice should have been. At a small roadside diner, Ellie pulled over, hoping to find a signal strong enough to reach Mark again. She sat at the counter, sipping a hot coffee, and turned on her CB radio with shaking hands. She scanned the channels, listening for any sign of him. Static, then, faintly, a crackle. Her heart jumped. She called out softly, "Mark, it's me, Ellie." Nothing, just the soft hiss of the radio. She put the microphone down and stared out the window, feeling more alone than ever. Just as she was about to give up, the diner's old radio switched on, playing a country song Mark had once mentioned loving. The lyrics filled the small room. "If I die before I wake, there's a promise I will keep." Tears slipped down Ellie's cheeks. It was like a message from him, a reminder that he was still out there, somewhere, listening. Ellie took a deep breath and pulled out a small notebook she kept in her glove box, filled with every word, every story, every song Mark had shared over the years. She scribbled a note. "Mark, I'm not giving up. I'll find you. Wherever you are, I'm coming." With new hope, Ellie climbed back into her truck, the radio crackling softly as she turned the wheel toward the unknown. Somewhere out there, beyond the static, a story was waiting to be finished. Days passed like a slow-moving storm. Ellie drove through dusty towns and empty stretches of road, her heart heavy, but her hope alive. Every night, she'd sit in the cab of her truck, gripping the microphone, calling out to Mark, but the silence stretched on. One evening, as the sun dipped behind distant mountains, Ellie stopped at a small gas station. The neon sign flickered weakly, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. Inside, the air smelled of motor oil and stale coffee. She told the clerk about Mark, the man who spoke to her through the radio, the friend she'll never met but loved deeply. The clerk listened quietly, then nodded. "You know," he said softly, "there's been talk around here about a trucker named Mark. Had a bad accident out on Route 66 a few days back. They say he hasn't been found yet." Ellie's breath caught. She clutched the counter for support. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice trembling. The clerk shrugged. "That's what people say. He's out there somewhere, maybe hurt, maybe worse." Ellie stepped outside, the desert night cold against her skin. She looked up at the stars, so many miles from home, so far from the voice she loved. But even in the darkest moments, she felt a quiet strength rising inside her. She wasn't ready to give up, not yet. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but Ellie made a silent promise. She would keep searching, keep hoping, keep calling Mark's name into the night, because some connections were more than words on a radio. They were lifelines, and she was holding on tight. Weeks slipped by, and Ellie's search grew more desperate. Each mile she drove was filled with hope and fear. Hope that she would find Mark alive, and fear of what she might discover. One cold morning, Ellie pulled into a small town just as the sun was rising. The streets were empty, the air sharp with winter's bite. She made her way to the local hospital, clutching a crumpled flyer she had found. Missing trucker, Mark Davis. At the front desk, she asked quietly, "Have you had a Mark Davis here recently?" The nurse's face softened with sympathy. "Yes, ma'am." We had a man brought in after a severe accident. He's been here for weeks. I'm sorry, but he's not expected to recover. Ellie's heart broke in a way words couldn't explain. She asked if she could see him, and the nurse nodded. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of machines. There, lying pale and fragile on the bed, was Mark. Ellie's breath caught. All the years of late-night talks, all the hopes and fears were inside this moment. She sat by his side, taking his hand gently, afraid to disturb the fragile silence. Mark's eyes fluttered open, and a weak smile touched his lips. "Ellie," he whispered, voice barely audible. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm here, Mark. I'm not going anywhere." They held on to each other, two souls connected by a love born from voices and stories, stronger than distance or time. That night, under the hospital's flickering lights, they said their quiet goodbyes, not with words, but with the promises in their hearts. The weeks after Mark's hospital stay were some of the hardest Ellie had ever faced. The doctors told her recovery would be slow, uncertain, and painful, but Ellie stayed by his side, determined to be his strength when he couldn't be his own. She packed up her truck and settled in the small town near the hospital. Every day, she read to him from her notebook, the stories they shared, the songs they loved, and the dreams they built over the radio waves. Mark's voice was weak, but when he spoke, it was filled with warmth and hope. "You came for me," he said one afternoon, squeezing her hand. "I never stopped believing you would." Ellie smiled through her tears. "I told you, Mark, some connections don't break." Slowly, very slowly, Mark began to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. The silence that had once threatened to swallow them was now filled with quiet moments of laughter and tenderness. One chilly evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Ellie and Mark sat outside on a bench. The sky was painted in soft pinks and purples, a promise of new beginnings. Mark looked at Ellie, his eyes shining. "I'm lucky, you know, to have found you." Ellie leaned her head on his shoulder. "We're lucky because we never gave up." As the stars appeared one by one, they knew their journey wasn't over. But together, they had found a way that through the darkness, toward a future full of hope, love, and the quiet music of healing hearts. Months passed, and life slowly found its rhythm again. Mark's strength returned little by little, and Ellie's hope grew stronger with each day. They spent quiet mornings watching the sunrise, sharing stories, and dreaming about what the future might hold. One chilly autumn afternoon, Ellie and Mark drove down the winding roads outside town. The windows rolled down as the crisp air filled the cab of Ellie's truck. The radio played soft country tunes, songs that once connected them in the lonely hours of the night. Mark reached over and took Ellie's hand, his smile warm and steady. You know, I never thought we'd get here. I thought I'd lose you to the silence. Ellie squeezed his hand gently. You never lost me. We were always singing the same song, even when the radio went silent. They pulled off at a small roadside diner, the kind with neon signs flickering and a bell that jingled every time the door opened. Inside, they found a cozy booth by the window where they could watch the world go by. As they sipped their coffee, Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. He opened it to a blank page and handed Ellie a pen. Write something, he said softly. Ellie smiled, her heart full as she wrote the words they both knew were true. Love is the song that never ends. Mark looked at her, eyes shining with tears and joy. Together, they had found a new beginning, one built on trust, healing, and the music that had first brought them together. And as the radio crackled softly in the background, they knew their love story was far from over. The years that followed weren't always easy, but Ellie and Mark faced every challenge side by side. Their love, born from whispered conversations across the desert night, grew stronger with every passing day. Mark returned to the road, driving his truck through highways and small towns, while Ellie found work as a mechanic in the same town where they'd first met face to face. Every night, without fail, they connected over the radio, no longer strangers, but partners weaving their lives together with every word. One late evening, as the desert stars sparkled above, Mark's voice came through the radio, calm and steady. Ellie, you're my home. No matter how far I drive, you're the song I carry in my heart. Ellie smiled, her eyes shining. And you're mine, Mark, forever. Their love had transcended distance, silence, and loss. It was a melody that played on, a story told through crackling radios and quiet moments, a promise that no matter what came, they would never be truly apart. And somewhere out there, beneath the endless sky, their voices continued to dance on the airwaves, forever entwined, forever in love. The stories may come to an end, but the thunder and rain will linger a little longer keeping you company in the quiet of the night. Sleep well and good night.